All right, good evening, everyone. We are just after 6 o'clock on my watch. So just out of respect of everyone's time, we'll go ahead and get this meeting started. And hopefully you can all hear me okay. All right, so good evening, everyone. My name is Hannah Oden, and I'm a senior planner with the town of Oro Valley and the town's project manager reviewing the applicant's proposal. I will also be facilitating tonight's meeting. So I want to thank you for joining us for the first neighborhood meeting regarding the proposed rezoning for the Oro Valley Church of the Nazarene, which is located at the northeast corner of the Calle Concordia and Calle Buena Vista intersection. So I want to start by discussing the purpose and agenda for tonight's meeting. The purpose of this meeting is to build upon the informational video that has already generated a number of questions and comments, and most importantly, provide you with an opportunity to share your comments and have your questions answered directly. The informational video for this project was posted on November 2nd, and if you haven't watched it yet, I highly recommend visiting ovprojects.com to do so. So the agenda for tonight's meeting is that first, I will provide information on the public participation process and give a brief overview of the project. The applicant is proposing a rezoning to Planned Area Development, or PAD, to expand church-related uses, which includes new athletic facilities. Second, the applicant's representative, Mr. Paul Oland, is going to provide a more detailed overview of the project. And next, it will be your turn. We have already received some questions and comments generated from that informational video. And again, if you haven't seen that video, please visit ovprojects.com to do so. From all the comments we received and having an understanding of the proposal, staff anticipates that there are at least 4 core topics that you will bring forward tonight. So these include conformance with the general plan and zoning code, compatibility with the surrounding area, especially concerning things like noise, lighting, views, and building height, drainage and open space conservation, and traffic and parking. So questions and comments are certainly not limited to this list, but we know that they have been mentioned and look forward to the upcoming discussion. We have asked the applicant to be prepared to address these key issues accordingly, and we've also invited key town staff representatives. So tonight is your chance to hear from the applicant about how these issues are being addressed. I do want to emphasize that your feedback is critical in helping shape an ultimate proposal that will be considered by town council. Public participation has shaped every rezoning application in Oro Valley, and we expect this one will be no different. So it's important to stay engaged in the process. Again, we are very early in this process, and this is only the first neighborhood meeting, so your feedback tonight is critical. Following your questions and comments, I'll provide more information about the next steps, and I'll then conclude by reiterating upcoming opportunities for public participation. So our number one goal tonight is to hear from you while ensuring a fair, efficient, and productive meeting. If you watch the informational video online, you may be familiar with the applicant's proposal, but tonight is an opportunity to hear directly from the applicant and town staff and share your concerns and ask questions. We are going to do our best to get through as many questions and comments as we can tonight. Due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and social distancing requirements, the town has transitioned to online public meetings to protect the health and safety of town residents while still providing ample opportunity to participate and stay involved. At this point, you may be familiar with online interactive Zoom meetings, but I will provide more information about how Zoom works and how to participate shortly. So if you have any trouble with Zoom tonight, you can call Jessica Hind, the town's constituent services coordinator, at any time during this meeting. And her number is 229-4711. And you can call her to request further assistance with Zoom. Her contact information is also shown on this slide. And if you are calling in by phone tonight and wish to participate, the passcode is also shown on this slide. So everyone's microphone, other than myself, will be muted throughout the meeting tonight, unless it's your turn to speak. And this is to ensure as smooth and efficient meeting as possible. Only I can turn on your microphone at the appropriate time when it's your turn, at which point you will be able to ask a question or provide comments. And this will also be the same for your video. Your video will be off unless it's your turn to speak, at which point I will turn it on if you wish, as you're providing comments or asking a question. Again, this is to keep the meeting fair and focused. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Zoom, I will provide a quick how-to on raising your computer or telephone activated virtual hand when you have a question. So tonight's meeting is scheduled to go no later than 7:30 tonight. And I'd like to note that the Zoom meeting video and PowerPoint presentation will be posted on this project's webpage as soon as possible. We have found that Zoom may take a day or two to process the recording. However, we will post it immediately once we receive it. Comments will also be posted online on the project webpage in a neighborhood meeting summary and forwarded to the Planning and Zoning Commission and Town Council when they consider the application. So where are we in the process? So for all rezoning applications, the town requires applicants to engage in community outreach at the front end of the process before a formal application is even submitted, because it is important to hear your comments and questions early and often. Does your participation matter? Absolutely. Community input has shaped every planned area development application in Oro Valley, and this case will be no different. So typically an in-person neighborhood meeting is held prior to a formal submittal of a planned area development application. However, the zoning code enables the Planning and Zoning Administrator to approve alternative methods of public outreach when warranted. With the ongoing COVID-19 social distancing requirements, alternative methods are necessary and are the best solution under the existing circumstances. An informational video was posted on ovprojects.com on November 2nd. And again, if you haven't watched that video, I highly encourage you to do so. So tonight is the first fully interactive Zoom neighborhood meeting. Following tonight's meeting, we expect a formal submittal from the applicant. After a formal submittal and staff review for code conformance, a second neighborhood meeting will be held. And there are additional opportunities for public input as well. This type of rezoning application requires consideration by the Planning and Zoning Commission at 2 public hearings. After receiving public testimony, they may vote to provide a formal recommendation to Town Council. The project will then be considered by Town Council. After receiving community testimony, Town Council may vote to approve, deny, or continue the application. And notices will be sent out in advance of all public hearings. So please help us spread the word about this proposal and upcoming public participation opportunities. Property owners near the site have been directly notified by mail. And furthermore, the site has been posted with yellow signs in multiple locations. If you weren't notified and wish to be in the future, please send us a request with your name and address to ask@orovalleyaz.gov. As of today, we do not have a formal submittal from the property owner, but we do anticipate one from the applicant. A pre-application concept for the site has been provided, and you will hear more about that directly from the property owner's representative, Mr. Paul Oland. So before moving on, I'd like to take a moment to orient everyone with respect to the subject property. The property, which is the Oro Valley Church of the Nazarene, is outlined in yellow and is approximately 27 acres in size. It is located on the northeast corner of the Calle Concordia and Calle Buena Vista intersection. Canyon del Oro High School is directly to the east, followed by James D. Craig Park, where the Oro Valley Aquatic Center is located, and then Oracle Road further to the east. Directly to the south, across Calle Concordia, is the Shadow Mountain Estates subdivision. The Linda Vista Citrus Tract subdivision is located directly north and west of the property, and the Campo Bello neighborhood is located southwest of the project site. So now that I've provided an overview of the location, I want to take a closer look at the area shaded in blue where the proposed church expansion would occur. The applicant is proposing to rezone the entire property, which is outlined in yellow, to planned area development to expand church-related uses, which includes new athletic facilities. Again, this is the area shown in blue. A planned area development, or PAD, is a unique zoning district with customizable zoning and development standards tailored to a specific site. And I will discuss this in more detail later on in my presentation. Within the proposed expansion area is the church's east campus and a single-family home to the north that has since been demolished. And that property is owned by the church. So now that I've discussed the process and provided some background information, I'll move on to discussing the applicant's proposal. As mentioned previously, the applicant is proposing establishing a new planned area development, which requires a rezoning from the existing zoning, which is shown on the left side of the slide, to planned area development, which is shown on the right side of the slide. The zoning of a property is what actually gives the property owner the legal right to use their land. It establishes which uses are permitted, so for example, homes or commercial uses, and which development standards are applicable, so things such as building height limitations and setback requirements. As you can see on this slide, the existing zoning on the subject property includes private schools, which does allow for churches, Church of the Latter-day Saints, PAD zoning for church and residential use, and R1-144 single-family residential zoning, which allows for homes on larger lots. A PAD zoning would accommodate the proposed church expansion and uses with potentially unique zoning and development standards. Again, planned area developments have customizable zoning derived from existing town zoning that is site-specific and allows a mix of uses. Oro Valley actually has 18 planned area developments, such as Rancho Vistoso, Capella, and the Church of the Latter-day Saints, which is shown on this slide, just to name a few. The goal of a planned area development zoning is to foster safe and efficient use of land, provide an integrated circulation system focused on vehicular and pedestrian safety, promote efficiency related to land use and design, and promote the protection of environmental resources. The proposed planned area development requires an application to establish the site-specific PAD zoning. This includes a detailed site analysis and development plan detailing building layout, circulation, and open space areas. As mentioned previously, planned area development zoning requires an underlying zoning district derived from town zoning. In this case, the applicant is proposing using the existing private school zoning requirements. Any proposed changes to these requirements requires a modification table with justification as part of the formal application. So as part of a rezoning application, the request includes a required concept plan for the area. I will just quickly walk through the concept as the applicant's representative will go into much more detail during their presentation. As you can see on the screen, the applicant is proposing redevelopment and an expansion of the church to construct a new student center, enclosed sports center, amphitheater, and an enclosed activity field. I do want to make sure that everyone in attendance tonight understands that the proposed new activity field at the northern edge of the expansion will be an enclosed building, as we have heard that there has been some misunderstanding about that among neighbors. Again, the applicant will provide much more detail on the concept during their presentation. It is important to establish that this request is to develop private property. All property owners have the right to request review of their development proposal. It is their charge to create, justify, and seek town council approval of a planned area development rezoning application. As part of this meeting, the applicant will begin to describe the rationale for their application. Again, I want to reiterate that we are very early in the process and that this is only the first step in an intensive public outreach process. This is an opportunity to learn more about the proposal, which includes staff, so that your questions and concerns can be addressed as part of a formal submittal. With that in mind, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Paul Oland with Paradigm Land Design, who is representing the property owner. He'll provide more detail regarding the proposal and explain the what and why of their application. So just give me one moment here. All right, Mr. Olin, you should be unmuted and whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Ms. Oden. Before I get started in some of the details, I would like Pastor Chris Collins to take a minute or two to explain the church's vision for this project.
Thank you. Let me go ahead and unmute Mr. Collins.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Collins, looks like your video is on and you are unmuted. So whenever you're ready.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for the time tonight to get an opportunity just to share with you a little bit of our heart and vision for what we'd like to pursue and do at Oro Valley Church of the Nazarene. And I'm the executive pastor here, but I'm representing two other members of our executive team. It includes Craig Coulter, our senior pastor, and Jeannie Hayward, who's our business manager. They're both on the call, but on behalf of them, we just want to say thanks for the opportunity tonight to be able to share with you what we feel like God is calling us to do. And it's always been a part of our goal and mission as a church to be able to make an impact in the community. And this project, as proposed, is really a continuation of that effort that started about 40 years ago when a group of people got together and started a church that they hoped would make an impact in the community of Oro Valley. We're a church that started in the library at CDO High School, and now we've been blessed with 27 acres of property to try to influence and impact the community in a positive way. And that's what we're hopeful to do every morning when we wake up and come to work here. And that's what we hope to do with all of our building projects and ministry initiatives. We have a strong desire to make sure that our community is impacted because of the work of our church. We feel like that's what we're called to do. This current proposal and property expansion and master plan is really a reflection of what we feel like we're being called to do to make a difference for families. And that involves going all in on sports ministry and the appropriate facilities to make a huge impact in our area. You know, churches can really choose a lot of different ways to try to reach outside the walls of their community and to reach outside their current group of people to help make a positive difference in people's lives. And those initiatives are not new to our area. Many churches have started preschools, and many churches have started daycares, and some churches have started schools. And what we're saying is we feel like here at OVCN that we're called and moving towards a sports ministry. And it's not a sports ministry that's only for our people. If it were only for our current group of people, there wouldn't be much of a need to try to expand or move forward. But I guess like any organization or any company or business, we're not satisfied with staying the way or the size that we are. We have a strong desire to grow our impact and grow our influence because we feel like the message of hope that will be associated with our sports program is one that will change lives, and we're dedicated to that effort. And these new buildings, they house facilities that accommodate our current needs as well as future growth, and it gives us the ability really to expand our reach and impact for decades to come. We feel like the best way to impact our community is to try to reach families, and we feel like you reach families by reaching kids. And that's the heart behind the need for the facility that would allow us to facilitate a sports ministry that makes a huge impact. And so we feel like all our buildings are an important part of what it means to be our church and to do ministry. So we're honored to be able to spend a little time tonight presenting our proposed master plan and the initiatives that are associated with that. And we're looking forward to hearing from our neighbors and getting feedback as we begin the process. And we look forward to that dialogue.
All right, thank you, Mr. Collins. So Mr. Olin, whenever you're ready.
All right. Thank you, Ms.
Okay,
Oden.
sorry about that.
No problem. Thank you very much. Okay, my name is Paul Oland. As Ms. Oden said, I'm with Paradigm Land Design, and I've got only 4 slides here tonight. The first one you can see is actually very similar to one that Ms. Oden had, so I won't dwell on it. But I do just want to point out that one of the motivations behind our design here is is building off of the activity center and the recreational uses that are established along Calle Concordia here with James Creek Park, the Aquatic Center, with CDO High School and all of their athletic facilities. And then also Calle Concordia is classified as a minor arterial road. So these sorts of uses are appropriate for this level of roadway. Go ahead and go to the next slide if you wouldn't mind, please. Thank you. So we've assembled a pretty large team to work on this project. Heading it is Seaver Franks Architects, along with Barker Contracting. They both have a lot of experience designing and building many buildings around Tucson, but especially larger buildings that are designed to look not quite as large as they are. There's no denying that what the church is proposing here are large buildings, but what Seaver Franks has been tasked with is designing them in such a way that they're scaled down a little bit to reduce the visual massing. So I've got some perspectives on the next slide here, but on this slide, I just wanted to kind of point out where the church is and the kind of the phasing and vision for where it's going. So the existing facilities, you can see on the left-hand side there, we have the existing sanctuary. And the third space, there's a building that's not actually shown on that aerial photo because we just don't have newer imagery, but that's the kids zone, actually the third space and the kids zone that were built recently. Those are there even though they're not on that picture. Then the three smaller buildings to the south there are administration and classroom buildings. So phase one of the proposed campus expansion has several elements, kind of starting from the south. We have a small administrative expansion there. You can see in the bottom left-hand corner next to the other three small buildings. And then to the right of that, we've got the first of the two larger buildings that the church is proposing. And that building on the south end of it will include a conference center. The conference center will also include classrooms, and it's been designed in a way that the classroom space is modular so that it can be adjusted for class size and can be divided up into all the grades or fewer grades or whatever the particular activity would dictate is the most appropriate way. And then there's a large conference room in the middle. And on that note, I just want to back up and say, as Pastor Collins referenced, this is primarily an outreach effort by the church, and so these facilities are intended to be worked into the community as an extension of the other uses that are around there. And so the idea is that this conference center would be available for groups to use on an as-needed basis, and of course the church would make those arrangements. So moving north from the conference center with the classrooms, it's labeled as student center on this map. It's a youth worship facility. There's a stage there. There is a championship basketball court in the area in front of the stage, and then there are bleachers, seating that can come down across the court for during worship services. So sort of dual use there. North of that, there's a little kind of a wedge shape there north of where it's the student center, and that's really the entry area, the kind of the lobby and plaza out front for that building. That'll have some minor concessions, a welcome desk, restrooms, IT, some of the back of house items are all going to be there. And then as the building extends up to the northeast, there are 4 additional courts, 3 basketball and a turf. And then on the far northeast end, there's a small maintenance area there that the church is needing. They have very little maintenance space right now, and they've got a pretty large campus as it is to maintain. So that'll serve that purpose. But the courts, of course, inside the turf will be artificial. And then those courts will be available for a wide range of uses, not only basketball, volleyball, but fitness activities, things like that. Out in front of that building, you can see another court, another basketball court. That's an outdoor court that will be covered. Yes, right there. Thank you. And that there completes phase one of the church's expansion plans. So moving north from there, just to the northeast of that sports building is an amphitheater. You can see it's labeled as phase two there. That'll be outdoor. Of course, any lighting and sound associated with that will be cast down. Sound will be designed in such a way and studied, and so that it does not impact surrounding properties. It's also tucked back in this part of the property to help buffer some of those potential impacts. Then north of that, we've got the large building. It is an indoor activity field building. During phase one, the church is planning to build the field, and then in phase two, which we're estimating is 5 to 7 years down the road, they would enclose the field in a building. So that is phase two. Really, most of phase two is that building, that enclosure of the field. From a circulation standpoint, the campus obviously circulates now off of Calle Concordia and Calle Buena Vista. So access to this expansion area will be through the existing campus and also off of a driveway off Calle Concordia, which is very close to an existing one. So that driveway will just be shifted over a little bit. The traffic engineer has confirmed that there's plenty of capacity on Calle Concordia. And as I mentioned, it is classified as a minor arterial. But you know, one of the things that will minimize this project's impact from a traffic standpoint is that the times when there will be more people on this property utilizing these various facilities won't align with rush hour. So when there's peak usage on the road because of typical rush hour, you won't have peak usage here, and vice versa. We don't expect a lot of overlap there just because of how programming has worked historically and how it's expected to work. So from a traffic impact standpoint, there it should be pretty minimal. I also want to point out open space. You can see on the southeast corner there, you've got a wash. It's the Carmack Wash. It is a mapped riparian area. So there's a level of protection established by the town for that area. So we're of course abiding by that. There's also a floodplain there that we need to handle very delicately. So not encroaching into the wash or into the floodplain much will help to mitigate some of those concerns. We've also in the northwest corner there, it's hard to read on this map, but there's a core resource area, which is another of the town's environmentally sensitive lands categories. And that's there because there has been mapped an old growth ironwood forest, if you will, that covers just the corner of this property and then extends up into some of the surrounding residential properties. So that's also being largely preserved there. There's also, I want to point out a 100-foot setback on that northern building. That is per the public schools, which used to be public schools and churches zoning category, which is our underlying land use proposed within this PAD. So there's a 100-foot setback for recreational uses in that zoning code, and we're proposing to comply with that. In those areas, we've got buffer yards all the way around, and where necessary, the existing vegetation will be supplemented to increase density and buffering. We're also looking at the potential for walls of varying heights along the perimeter where different concerns exist. Some concerns might be visual. Some concerns might be having to do with light trespass. Some concerns may just have to do with access and wanting users of this facility to not have access right up to the property line. For example, I know there are some horses in the area, and some separation, maintaining separation there is important. So we will be as this design progresses, we'll be working with some of those adjacent landowners to identify where denser vegetation, higher vegetation, different kinds of walls, heights, and materials would be appropriate to help mitigate some of the impacts that we know this project will have. If you could go to the next slide, please, Ms. Oden. Thank you. So these are renderings from Seaver Franks Architects of the two larger buildings proposed, and these are large buildings. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So what our job is, primary job, is to try to find a way to have the buildings be only as large as they need to be to accommodate the uses inside, but also then to break up that visual mass. The Oro Valley has some pretty stringent design guidelines, which we are following and exceeding. And we'll continue to work with staff as we move through the process with conceptual architecture to try and fine tune these buildings to further decrease the visual mass and the apparent scale. You can see on the top one there, we've got different geometries, different textures. It's hard to tell, but there are different textures on there, different colors. We've got wainscoting. We've got signage in different places, identifying what buildings, the main entry there. We've also got some human scale elements there. You can see on both of those buildings there where the entries are to try and bring the scale down at those entry points, and then it goes back up from there, of course. So different, like I said, different colors and textures. What these show is actually what's called a reverse tapered column, which is a structural feature, but when used appropriately with different colors, it can be actually a nice design feature that helps to further break up those large walls. So again, these are large buildings, and what we're trying to do is find ways to cut down on how large they actually look. The top one there, the activity field building, again, that's a phase 2 improvement proposed that is we're expecting 5 to 7 years off. That will be ranging from 47 to 52 feet. And as a point of reference, the CDO Performing Arts building that's just actually adjacent to this property, it's obviously not all as tall, but that center portion, if you're familiar with it, that sticks up above everything else, that we believe is 60 to 62 feet. So this building would be about 10 feet below that at its highest points. The sports and student center there shown on the bottom, again, this is the phase 1 improvement. This is the real push for phase 1. It is 33 to 36 feet tall, and then some of those accent walls there at the entry there and on the corners do go up to about 42 feet. So those designs are still being adjusted, but the heights that we are proposing are based on recommendations from a national sports consultant who the church has been working with for a while now to try to identify and really make sure that the facilities that we're building will meet the needs that they're proposed to meet. And so the heights that we're proposing are the minimums that they have recommended to accommodate the sorts of activities, the soccer balls and footballs and basketballs and volleyballs. They all tend to go high. So obviously we're not proposing in the larger one to allow full-blown punts and things like that. That would be a much taller building, but something that accommodates everyday play is really what the church is designing for here. Next slide, please. This is an updated perspective that we've put together that shows the proposed buildings in the context of the surroundings, looking kind of east, southeast toward Oracle Road and Push Ridge. So the focus of this graphic is really to explain how we're tying in these recreational facilities to the established massing that's already along Calle Concordia with all of the buildings in the CDO campus, the Oro Valley Aquatic Center, James Creek Park, It's all an established activity center with recreational uses, and we're proposing to basically extend that further west. We're also looking for ways that we can synergize with Amphi School District. We've had a brief conversation with them just about possible points of cooperation where these two facilities can really help each other. And one thing they mentioned, which the church would be glad to accommodate, is that during graduation ceremonies, there's always a real shortage of parking on the CDO campus, and so overflow parking for special events like that is just the kind of thing that we're hoping this campus can provide, or ways to aid other elements of the community. This is envisioned as a community asset. It's a nonprofit operation, and as Pastor Collins said, primary focus is really outreach and finding ways to benefit the region. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Collins and Mr. Oland. So before we get started with your questions, I'd like to explain how you can all participate during this meeting. So during the question and comment period, if you wish to speak, please use the raise your hand function in Zoom. Now, there are two ways to do this. So if you're calling in by phone, we want to press *9 to raise your hand. And again, if you are calling in by phone and wish to participate, please use the passcode shown at the upper right portion of this slide. Now, for those of you who are participating on any platform that uses Zoom, such as the app or the website, you'll want to find the participants icon at either the top or bottom of your screen, depending on your device. You'll want to click on participants, and this will open a dialog box where you will see an option to raise your hand as shown on the right side of this slide. Alternatively, if you are using an iPad or tablet, you may need to click the three dots that say more as shown on this screen in order to get the option to raise your hand. Raised hands will be moved to the top of the list in the order in which they were raised. I will then announce your name and then mute you so you can speak and also turn on your video if you wish. When it is your turn, please make sure that you are also not muted on your personal device and that your video is not turned off on your personal device if you want it on by using the microphone and video icons shown on this slide. When I announce who is up to speak, I will also announce the next person whose turn it will be so that that person will be prepared. Once you've asked your question or made a comment, I will re-mute you to allow the speaker to provide an answer. Once an answer has been provided, I will unmute you again to provide a follow-up question or remark if you have one before moving on to the next participant. Now, again, if you're having any technical issues with Zoom or have further questions, please call our Constituent Services Coordinator, Jessica Hind, at 229-4711. She's at the ready to help and is available during the entire meeting. So we're going to do our best to get through as many questions and comments as possible tonight. Now, it looks like we do have a number of participants tonight, and so we'll do our very best to get to each and every one of you. So please keep your comments or questions to no longer than 3 minutes, out of fairness to all participants who wish to be heard. I will respectfully remind folks of this guideline as needed. Now, my aim tonight is to keep things moving along in a fair and efficient manner. Again, the goal of this meeting is to have a productive conversation about the project and provide constructive feedback and questions. So please keep that in mind as we move through the meeting tonight. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started with your questions and comments. So please bear with me. You probably already noticed it does take me a minute or two to move between speakers and mute and unmute folks. So just give me one moment here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I do see we have a number of hands up. So our first speaker is going to be Anthony Ferreira, and I do apologize if I butcher anyone's name. And on deck after that is Timothy Fagan. All right, Mr. Ferreira, I am going to unmute you.
Oh,
All right, and it looks like your video is on, so it looks like you're good to go. Go ahead whenever you're ready, sir.
okay. Hi. Yeah, Anthony Ferrara. I'm a homeowner in the area. I happen to be on a couple of those renderings. So yeah, I've got some obviously particular interest in what's going on here. Yeah, I mean, I think in general, I think you guys are doing a great job of representing that, you want to be good neighbors. And I think obviously I like to hear that. But yeah, I mean, obviously I have some concerns about putting a building, which, as what I've heard described as essentially the size of a Home Depot, right in the middle of a neighborhood. So I do have a specific question other than that comment, which is I think you mentioned the 100-foot setback, and is that from that's from all the property lines? That was the first question. It's going to basically that phase 2 building is the one I'm curious about, the largest building, 100-foot setback. And is that from all the different property lines, and also the 47 to 52-foot height, which obviously hasn't been set yet, because these are still initial conversations. Is that in line with the underlying zoning, or is there a variance that's going to be asked for because of that to allow you to get to that height? What is the height requirement right now? I guess is the question. And I think on the R144, it's a lot lower than the 45 feet. I think the proposed new zoning, I think probably dictates a certain height. And is the 47 to 52 in line with that, or are you asking for a variance? So I think there are a couple questions in there regarding the setbacks and then the height.
Great. No, thank you very much for those questions. I'm going to direct those over to Mr. Paul Oland. Just give me a moment here. I'm going to ask to start his video. I'm going to unmute him.
All right,
All
can you hear
right.
me?
Yes, we can. So yeah, Mr. Oland, if you could just address that question about the 100-foot setback, if that's from all property lines, as well as the question about building height being in line with the underlying zoning.
Sure, thank you. So the first question, the 100-foot setback, I don't know if it's possible to get the site plan back up on the screen or not, but the 100-foot setback is from the north property line and the west property line relative to that phase 2 athletic field building. The other buildings, yeah, thank you, Ms. Oden. The other buildings there are further from the property lines than that. So that 100-foot setback is applicable to that building to the north, and then again it goes higher from there. So and in terms of the building height, the public schools and churches zone, sorry, that's what it used to be called. Now it's public schools now that the federal government actually passed a law a number of years ago that said religious uses are allowed in all zones. So the town dropped the N churches from this zone at that point because it was superfluous. But the public schools zone allows building heights of 24 to 45 feet, depending on the use. So I think if memory serves, gymnasiums are allowed up to 36 feet, auditoriums up to 45. These buildings are they're sort of hybrid buildings. The phase 1 building, obviously the conference center down at the bottom isn't a gymnasium or an auditorium. So it's kind of on the lower end. The youth worship there is truly an auditorium, but we're not needing or proposing to go up to 45 feet for that. The rest of it is more gymnasium. So in the PAD zone, what Ms. Hannah explained at the beginning there, so is that the way the PAD zone works in Oro Valley is that you specify underlying zoning categories and then specific points where you're proposing deviation from the design guidelines of that zone. So what we're proposing is to adhere to all of the guidelines, but we're proposing to deviate on the issue of building height. So that's that we are asking for more than what would be allowed, although that zone does allow some fairly tall buildings anyway. So that's our point of adjustment, if you will, to the zone within the PAD. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Mr. Oland. Mr. Ferrara, I'm going to unmute you. Did you have
Thank
a
you.
follow-up question or remark?
Please, yeah. So I mean, so what you're asking then for is a height discrepancy, but there's no, you're not, because it's based on your proposed usage in 5 to 7 years. So, but there's nothing that's gonna hold you to actually building that facility. You could build something else. You're asking for a height requirement deviation, right? Because I mean, there's not, right now is all we're trying to decide on is whether or not the proposed zoning changes will take effect. And what you're asking for is a zoning change as well as a height variance.
So I guess to clarify, the height that we're asking for deviating from that public school zone is the only reason to ask for the PAD zoning, because the land use isn't in question because of federal guidelines. So what we're asking for is that height. Now, in Oro Valley, rezonings are tied to site plans. So
Okay. Yeah.
as part of our proposal, this is what we're locked into.
Right.
Now, 5 to 7 years from now, or whenever, the church could decide we're just not going to build phase 2, and there's no obligation that they have to build that building, but we're asking for permission to.
Right. Okay. Okay. I think that's good for now. Thank you.
Thanks.
Great, thank you, Mr. Farrar, and thank you, Mr. Oland. Let me just stop sharing the screen here. All right. So it looks like our next speaker is Mr. Timothy Fagan. And then after that on deck is, if your screen name or username is RY, you are on deck after that. Okay, so Mr. Fagan, I'm going to ask to unmute you.
Okay.
All right, so it looks like you're unmuted. Would you like your video on, sir?
Sure.
Okay, just give me one moment here. I'm gonna ask to start your video. Might see a little notification on your screen. There we go. All right, so it looks like we can see and hear you. All right, sir, whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Okay. Let me start with Linda Vista Citrus Tracks, which I used to have the original zoning, but I can't find it. But I think it was established nearly 100 years ago. Personally, we bought our lot more than 30 years ago. We built in 1991. The zoning is specific, not just single family residence, but no more than one house per 3.3 acres. And it's also zoned for farms and ranches, although limiting the number of animals. Wait a minute, can't read my notes. So, and we were by no means the first people to build. And there was obviously a lot of people who wanted places with that zoning. And I think it's somewhat presumptuous for the church to buy property zoned that way, knock down the house, and then figure that they're going to change the zoning, which will affect views, traffic, a number of other things, and may affect property values. And then my third point is I'm not really familiar with church sports or sports church. But we have not been presented with any evidence that more sports are needed. My kids grew up around here. There were plenty of sports in the schools and otherwise. And so if there's evidence that there is need for more sports, then I think that the petitioners should provide that evidence before the next meeting. Anyway, so as you can tell, I am opposed to this use of that land. And I'm done 24 seconds early.
Thank you, Mr. Fagan, for those comments. Mr. Olin, did you want to respond to any of that, maybe regarding property values, compatibility, or if there is any evidence for more sports facilities that are needed in the area?
Sure. So the Church of the Nazarene has been working, as I mentioned, with a national consulting firm that has helped out hundreds of churches around the nation expand their outreach efforts through sports. It's been incredibly successful, and we can certainly provide lots of that documentation and evidence about how this approach to outreach has been a benefit to other communities and has been a very successful outreach method for other churches. Also, I hope it goes without saying that an indoor field of any sort in the Tucson summer is going to be something that people are going to be a bit excited about. I know when I was a kid playing soccer, that would have been great. And my own kids would have been nice too. But at any rate, we will certainly get some more information from the church's consultant.
Great, thank you, Mr. Oland. Mr. Fagan, I'm going to mute you one more time. Did you have any follow-up questions or remarks?
Just a couple. So those comments suggest that the building's going to be air conditioned, which is going to use a lot of electricity. Global warming is a problem. And I have concerns there. And as far as a church having an outreach, that's not what I asked for. I said, is there a need for more sports? And you're talking about, oh, they're working with this company and they've helped other churches do sports. That's not evidence of a need for more sports. So if you don't have that now, perhaps that can be presented at the next meeting.
Thank you again, Mr. Fagan. Mr. Oland, if you have any information maybe about the energy use of the building, maybe that's premature, but if there's any information you can provide on that, or any data about the need for more sports, if you have that now.
Yeah, I don't have any further comment.
Okay. Thank you. So let's see. Just going to move on to our next speaker here. Just give me one moment. All right, so next on deck is, some of your screen name is RY, and then after that is going to be Bill Taylor. Okay, so RY, I am going to ask to unmute you. So just make sure you're also not muted on your end. Okay, it looks like you are unmuted. Can you hear us? RY, if you are speaking, we can't hear you. And if there's an issue with your microphone. All right, I'm going to remute you. We'll go to Bill Taylor and then we'll go right back to you. RY, there is an option in Zoom to maybe test your speakers with that microphone icon. So that might be helpful. I have to do that every now and then. So we'll go right back to you and hopefully we can hear you. So next is Bill Taylor. And Bill, I'm going to unmute you. All right, so it looks like we can hear you. Would you like your video on, sir? Nope. unmute you again. All right, Mr. Taylor, looks like you are unmuted.
They're talking.
Hello?
Yes, we
Okay,
can hear
so-
you. Would you like your video on?
Sure, if you want.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Just give me
Okay.
one moment here. Okay, so it looks like you are good to go. So whenever you're ready.
Okay, so my name is Bill Taylor. This is my wife, Mary. We've lived here in this house since 1993. We live directly across Calle Concordia from this proposed expansion. I worked diligently in 1996 with the Oro Valley Push Ridge Christian Church on their rezoning, which is the pad that everyone keeps talking about. And the document of the pad is available online. It also has a whole portion in there about the church that owned the property before the Nazarenes bought it. And there was a whole list of items that the church was supposed to comply with to maintain the zoning, like not cutting down trees, leaving a barrier of trees between the street and the building. For a longest time, they had a gate across the entryway because we wanted them to control the access so that kids wouldn't make it like a lover's haven, any of that kind of stuff. I was against it to start with, and I became for it. All my neighbors were very mad at me because they didn't want it to happen. I'm really kind of sad now that it did happen because it's been nothing but a big thorn in our sides for the last 28 years of living here. You mentioned the part about the talking to CDO High School about their graduation needing more parking. You would not believe how congested everything gets here. We've lived through 28 of those. It's only for a couple hours a night for one night of the entire year. So that's not an important thing. But what I don't want to have to do is look out my front window or my door all the way to the back of the property, 20 acres away, and look at all these buildings. If you want to leave a lot of trees and things like that as noise barriers and those kind of things, then it would be fine. Also, we live directly on Carmack Wash. Not a night goes by that I have a video camera outside and a source of water. Not a night goes by that there aren't raccoons or a herd of javelinas with their little babies, quail, rabbits, bobcats by the thousands. I've got literally thousands of pictures over the last 28 years of all of those animals. I would hate to see it destroyed because you decided that you had to have your buildings for all of the open space that we have here, that we had here when we bought our property, thinking that it was going to be that way for a very long time. The other point I like to make is that when you drive down Calle Concordia, you'll notice that a lot of the homes have oleander hedges or big trees in their front yards. And the reason for that is trying to block the noise from Calle Concordia. So anyway, thank you.
No, thank you very much for those comments. I'm going to direct some of those to Mr. Oland. Maybe if you can discuss parking more, compatibility with the area, environmental conservation. Want to respond to any of those points and comments that were made?
Sure, thank you. Well, I'm not familiar with with whatever happened in 1993, but I'll certainly look into it. The LDS PAD, which does cover bits and pieces of this property, is pretty light in terms of its development regulations. So I'll look into the zoning case that established the existing public schools and churches zoning. See if I can't dig up some of those old restrictions and see where we're at with that. Certainly installation of additional landscaping. I mentioned possibility of screen walls and things like that in certain areas where there's particular points of concern. Those are the types of things that we're very interested in terms of reducing the impact and mitigating some of the impact. So we'd love to talk more about that. In terms of the Carmack Wash, we are leaving Carmack Wash undisturbed. So as I mentioned, the town has that that wash identified as a critical resource area, and so we're staying out of it. We will be putting some erosion protection in just to keep it from wandering. But the heart of the wash there, where the vegetation is, and most of the floodwaters, those will remain untouched.
All right, thank you, Mr. Oland. Hopefully my audio is okay. I think I got a little quiet there. But Bill Taylor, I'm going to unmute you just one more time to see if you have a follow-up question or comment. Okay, so just make sure you're also not muted on your end.
Okay, can you hear me?
Go ahead.
So the Church of Latter-day Saints pad number 3 is a document that's available online. And it does actually have several pages of conditions that were supposed to have been met with the construction and with using the property. And it's actually labeled as ordinance number 96-33. And the town of Oro Valley can get that for you, I'm sure, without any problem. I just had one other question. What about all of the runoff from the parking lots and the roofs of these buildings? When we originally bought this property, the state of Arizona had just got through spending a whole bunch of money to build this box culvert that's on Calle Concordia, and to try to put in some other erosion control things. But no one below me on Carmack Wash has any kind of erosion control if you increase the flow from this creek.
Right. So by Oro Valley statute, we won't be increasing the flow. The church and the civil engineers, they're working on their drainage plans right now, but they will need to put in basins, either underground or on the surface with landscaping that will capture and collect additional runoff from those impervious surfaces, and then meter it back out into the wash in a way that it does not increase or decrease or change. We're not allowed to change the flow leaving the site or entering the site. We have to accept it just the way it's coming on today and let it go just the way. And the engineering will need to demonstrate that.
Great, thank you, Mr. Oland. Hopefully I'm a little louder now, but I will deal with my audio. So next on deck is Andy Thomas, followed by Ann Young. So Andy, Mr. Thomas, I'm going to ask to unmute you.
Hi there.
Okay, so it looks like you are good to go. Go ahead.
Yep. How's it going? Yeah, we live directly across the street. I think we're next door neighbors to Bill Taylor. And it looks like by the plan, so there's the current driveway, for what they call the East Campus. But it looks like the plan is to utilize the driveway more or less for like what the neighbor, the property that they bought. And that lines up like directly with our, one of our living rooms. And so just our concern, I know you already talked about this, Paul, but, so like for us on the opposite side of the street where all of the headlight, would go directly into, right into our house. What is there anything to mitigate, because obviously we can't put trees and stuff in the driveway. So yeah, I just would love to, hear is there anything on the kind of the light pollution, plan if you live directly across the street and the headlights are going to go, right into.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it is a tough issue when there's businesses and non-residential uses and residential uses both accessing the same large street. But there's just off the top of my head, the way we've dealt with this in other spots, not with the Nazarene campus, but in other places where we have the same kind of dynamic is actually having additional landscaping or screen walls installed on the opposite side of the street. So I don't we can look at it. I'm not sure which of these driveways is yours, but we can look at that and maybe come up with a way to soften it up. We could also shift the location of our access drive a little bit, a few feet, one in one direction or another, may make a big difference. Again, we'll have to just look at it in the field and see how stuff's really lining up. So we'd follow up with you. I think you may be muted.
All right, and Mr. Thomas, I'm gonna just unmute you one more time. If you had a follow-up remark or question, just make sure you're also not muted on your end. There
Yeah,
we go.
thanks.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I would look forward to the conversation, that we can have ongoing about that for sure.
I'll get a hold of you.
Thank you very much. So next on deck is Ann Young, followed by Ed Clary. Just give me one moment here. Okay, Ann, I'm going to ask to unmute you. Just also make sure you're not muted on your personal device. All right, and looks like you're unmuted. Would you like your video on?
Sure.
Okay, just give me one moment. All right, so looks like your video's on. Don't know if we can see you, but go ahead.
Okay. I have a statement to make for myself and my family, who are owners of the 5 acres just west adjacent to the property, which would be very badly affected by that huge warehouse building they're thinking about putting in. My family and I are the owners of the large lot just west and adjacent to the church property. All of us are very concerned about the height of the building, which will obscure our $1 million view of Push Ridge. And I know the church is very proud of their Push Ridge view and have commented on it. And I'm very, very proud of my Push Ridge view. It's just really frightening for me to think about that building going right against my property there. Also, the trees they'd have to put in to cover it would be just as much of obscuring the view as the building. We've enjoyed this property for 40 years. And as we said in our letter, we've enjoyed the church as a neighbor. So we have no complaints about the present church. I'm also concerned about increased traffic. Right now, we only have to put up with traffic to CDO twice a day, and the church only on Sundays. Sometimes I can barely get out on Calle Concordia because of the traffic, so I try to avoid any increased traffic there. It's not safe. That corner at Calle Concordia and Buena Vista is dangerous in the sense that there's no crosswalk for walkers who do a lot of walking and bicyclists who do a lot of bicycling on Buena Vista. It's a big road for walkers and bicyclists. My son Ray was the one, R. Young, who was unable to unmute it or something, but he will speak if we can get back to him. Hopefully he's got it fixed now. But those are my concerns, especially the height and the breadth of that one big building they're planning to build in 5, 6, 7 years. So definitely against any rezoning that would let you build that, the church build that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for those comments, Ms. Young. Mr. Oland, if you just wanted to maybe address some concerns about that building height and maybe some traffic concerns as well regarding safety.
Sure. So thank you. In terms of the building height, the building we're proposing is is about 550 feet from Miss Young's house. And something we offered to another neighbor that we met with previously was to actually go and erect building height poles, just skinny poles that would be put up at the corners of the buildings to help our neighbors really understand how big the building is going to be. Again, it is a big building, but at 550 feet away, and given how high Push Ridge is relative to this part of town, we've done some very preliminary studies just in terms of the angles, and there is an impact to the views along the foothills, but it doesn't go beyond that. So what I would offer in this case as well is to get those building height poles up so that Miss Young and the other neighbors who are right next to us can really have a better understanding of what the size of the building is going to be and what the potential view impacts could be. So I'll offer that again, and we'll certainly, the church is committed to doing that. In terms of the safety concerns, I will have to ask our traffic consultant, traffic engineer, to weigh in. He's not on the call tonight, but certainly as part of our submittal and further documentation, we'll ask him to take a look at the safety concern there at Calle Buena Vista and Calle Concordia. If I understand correctly, there were two issues. One, that the traffic volume on Calle Concordia sometimes makes it difficult to exit Calle Buena Vista onto Calle Concordia, and then also Calle Buena Vista is heavily used by bicyclists and pedestrians. So there's some concerns there. Could I ask, are the concerns on Calle Buena Vista in terms of the pedestrian and bicycle use, do those have to do more or both with speed of vehicular traffic or lack of pedestrian facilities, or what's the perceived danger there? If you could help me narrow in on that.
Well, when I tried to cross Calle Concordia to come to my home, which is north of Calle Concordia, sometimes it's very difficult because of the traffic, but that's just a few times a day. Here, I may be dealing with it all day long, trying, because there's no stop sign, obviously, there. And so I'm worried about the traffic, not only for me, but for everybody in the neighborhood. And like they've said before, this was a residential neighborhood based on 3.3 acre homes. And they certainly don't vary from that. And that's what we bought the property for, and that's what we hope to live in.
And people are not going 25 miles per hour.
And they are, well, yeah, sometimes the traffic doesn't adhere to the speed limit. But I've been felt threatened by traffic in various times, especially during the rush to school, but you can stay away from the streets when the school's, let in and going in. But I don't think we'll have a break now if we get that big building going, that warehouse building. So that's my comment. Thank you for your.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Oland, was there anything else you wanted to say on that, or?
No, we'll look into the traffic possible issues there at the intersection for sure.
Great. So we'll move on to our next speaker. Next is Ed Clary, and RY, who I believe is Ray Young, if I heard correctly, is back on. So we'll go to Ed Clary and then RY. So just give me one moment here. All right, so Ed Clary, it looks like you are unmuted.
Okay.
All right, would you like your video on, sir?
That's fine.
All right, I'm gonna ask to start your video. All right, looks like you are good to go whenever you're ready.
Okay, good. First, thanks to everybody for having this meeting. I'll try to keep it as brief as I can because we're running out of time. My question is actually probably geared more towards town staff, actually based on one of Mr. Olin's comments. And it's very germane based on what Ms. Young just talked about as far as traffic and so forth and so on. We actually live on Calle El Milagro, which is a little bit further west, but our house is set back almost halfway between Calle El Milagro and Buena Vista. Calle El Milagro has a fraction of the traffic that Buena Vista does. The last pedestrian death in Oro Valley that I'm aware of occurred in front of my home a couple years ago, about the 4th of July. It is dangerous to walk and bike around here, and increasing traffic right there, that's gonna cause some safety issues. I just add that based on what Ms. Young just talked about. My question, and then a couple comments after that, primarily comes down to, we also, we live next to the town facility at 680 West Calle Concordia. And we've had a lot of issues with the town, interactions with the town over the last few years. And as part of those interactions, I am 99% sure that the town even acknowledged that Calle Concordia already carries more traffic than it was designed to carry as of today. Now, I can't swear to that, and that's something the town staff would have to dig up and look up, because that came up in discussions relative to that town facility just a block away from the church, and traffic issues with some proposed changes that the town had for 680 West Calle Concordia. If that's true, if Calle Concordia has already passed its traffic capacity, this whole thing is, it's really going to make it a lot worse. So that's, my question deals with the traffic there. A couple comments. First off, and I don't mean to be flippant, I just want to throw this out there to keep it, kind of quick. The overall goal is admirable, but the thing that I think we already see that most people object to is especially the larger building to the north. And what we're looking at is essentially a football field that you guys are going to build a building around. Where I come from back east, that's called a stadium. Okay, and I'm not trying to be facetious. That's called a stadium where I'm from. And in this neighborhood, a stadium is just not appropriate. It's not. And the second comment was, I actually watched your online presentation, Mr. Olin, beforehand. And you made a comment about your amphitheater, which really kind of got my attention. And I just want to throw it out here. These are your words. You talked about that amphitheater and how it's going to offer a beautiful view of Push Ridge. And you're absolutely right, it will, for the users of that facility. Whereas the people who have lived here for years and worked their hearts and souls and their fortunes into their homes here are going to have that view affected. Now, even if it just quote unquote affects the foothills, having the top of an industrial building followed by mountains versus the whole view is very different. So thanks for your time, folks. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for those questions and comments. Regarding the traffic and capacity on Calle Concordia, I'm actually going to direct that to the town's permitting division manager, Mr. David Laws. Just give me one moment. I'm going to unmute him. All right. Mr. Laws, looks like you should be unmuted and your video's on. Go ahead.
All right, thanks, Hannah. So in response to the question on the capacity of Calle Concordia, I don't know if we're at capacity today. Honestly, I would be surprised if we are. A two-lane road does carry a pretty high capacity, but one of the things that we'll see with the traffic study that's going to be prepared is the current volume of the road as it stands today. So they'll be doing analysis, traffic counts of what that current volume is, and then what will be the volume with the project. And from that, we can determine what mitigation may be required as a result of that. And we go from there. So any negative impacts to the roadway that requires an improvement, that is borne fully by the developer. So the church, by adding additional traffic, if it creates a level of service issue, meaning that it's creating some delays, maybe at an intersection or some safety issues, they would have to put in the necessary improvements, whether that's widening the roadway, adding additional turn lanes, those types of things to make sure that it functions safely.
Great, thank you, Mr. Laws. Mr. Clary, I'm going to unmute you just to make sure that you didn't have any follow-up questions or comments for that. Oh, you're still muted.
Sorry about that. How about now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, yeah. No, not right now. I didn't expect that answer to be readily available per se. But I think it's something we do need to look at because again, in our discussions previously with the town, that's what we were told. Now, I don't remember the exact, source of that. That was a couple of years ago, 2 to 3 years ago, but it would be a major concern. And like I said, we actually had a pedestrian death in front of our home and the traffic on this road is much less than the roads we're talking about. So just something to think about there. And I appreciate everyone's time. I'll let you go on to the next question.
Great, thank you very much. Yeah, and we are kind of nearing the end of our meeting time, so we will try to move through as many questions as we can for the end of the meeting. So RY, which I think is Ray Young, you are next. So I'm going to ask to unmute you. And then on deck after that will be Doug. All right, Ray or RY, can you hear us? Rather, can we hear you? If you're speaking, we still can't hear you. So I do apologize for the technical issues. Please be sure to send us any questions or comments to ask at orovalleyaz.gov so we can be sure to take those comments into consideration for a formal submittal. All right, so on deck next is Doug. So I'm going to ask to unmute you.
Okay.
All right, you should be unmuted. Would you like your video on?
Sure.
All right. All right, you are good to go whenever you're ready, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Actually, one of the comments that was made by Mr. Oland is, they've owned the property for 40 years. We bought this property in 78, and actually we've been here for about 40 years. And part of the reason we bought here and built here was because of the R144. We've actually got a deck in the backyard so we can see the view.
Yeah.
So, it's you kind of have to take that into consideration. And the one of your goals for your rezoning was sounded like was compatibility. I find that being a major transition going from R144 to this PAD. You've not only got the congestion, you've got the height restrictions to deal with. It's just an absolute major change. And as far as the building that's in the back room, I noticed on a couple of your shots, there are an awful lot of athletic fields in there. You've got CDO, you've got actually Push Ridge Christian, you've got the park, and there's an awful lot of green there and an awful lot of athletic fields for young kids, which I've had 2 kids that went to CDO, so I'm totally in favor of that. And I think it's quite interesting that you want to build I like the word stadium because that's exactly what it is. We've got a Division I school in town that doesn't have a stadium, and you want a church on a secondary street that does not go through, neither end of Cali Concordia goes through, and you want to put a stadium on there. I find that very incompatible. And your aerial view, gorgeous picture, I got to tell you, but the thing I found commanding on that is, that building for the supposed, what shows up as a green field on your picture, although it does say it's an indoor field, actually dwarfs the CDO auditorium. It totally commands this whole acreage. It's not only,
It's in our backyard.
Ann Young's and the house south of her. Our southeast property corner touches the northwest property corner of the school. And it's interesting, you're talking 100-foot setbacks, which I guess if it were a lot smaller building, that would sound acceptable, but the setbacks, you've got the parking lots, and the setback, I'm assuming, is actually to the physical building. So I just would really hate to see this thing go in. That dwarfs anything it even dwarfs the high school. And your number 2 goal is compatibility with the neighborhood. I find this 180 degrees out of compatibility with the neighborhood. Everybody bought in here because of the R144 zoning. Gorgeous place to live. Don't mess it up.
Great, thank you, sir. Mr. Oland, was there anything that you wanted to address regarding compatibility, the issues that were brought up?
No, I heard the speaker's comments, so they're noted. So we're early in the process. We're just starting to look at ways to offset some of the impacts that we know are present here. So we'll keep looking at that stuff.
Thank you. Okay, so next on deck is Karen's iPad, and then hopefully we'll have time for Keg's iPad, K-E-G. So Karen's iPad, if that is you, I'm going to ask to unmute you. All right, looks like you were unmuted. Would you like your video on? All right, Karen's iPad, if you are speaking, we can't hear you. All right, so I apologize for any difficulties you're having. Go ahead and test your speakers. If there is time, please give Jessica Hind a call at 229-4711. We'll go back to you real quick, but I think we have time for just two more. So I'm going to unmute KEG's iPad, Keg's iPad.
Hi.
All right. All right, would you like your video on?
Sure, that's fine.
All right. All right, go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay, thanks, Hannah. I own the horse boarding facility just catty corner from the church. And in addition to the traffic concerns expressed by others, one of the biggest things that has impacted our property is the runoff. And when they built that new facility, we've had an increasing amount of runoff from the new part that isn't shown on there. But I'm just really concerned that all of that hardscape is going to cause even more runoff unless they can really address the drainage issue. Is going to be really detrimental to my property. And also with regard to the traffic, if they do a study right now or a count of the traffic, it will be an artificial count because since the high school isn't in 100%, I know when the traffic is really full with the high school, and it certainly isn't right now because of the fact that the high school is not utilizing full capacity every day. So that's basically, I really would like to see what they would address as far as the corner of those southwest corner of Calle Concordia and Buena Vista. Okay.
Great. Thank you very much for those questions. Mr. Oland, would you like to respond to that runoff, drainage and traffic issues? And then Mr. David Laws from the town also has his hand up. So we can go to him next.
Sure. Well, I won't steal Mr. Law's thunder, but in terms of the drainage, I'll have the civil engineers pull the drainage reports from that last expansion and take a look at the calculations and everything, and just make sure that all fits together. And I know that with that concern being expressed, that's something that the town's going to look at very closely as well. And in terms of the traffic counts, I know that what the traffic engineers have been doing, both on the public side and the private side, is basically applying a multiplier to everything nowadays because of COVID, looking at historical patterns, applying growth rates to make sure that what the numbers they are using are at least defensible. So, but again, that's a little out of my bailiwick. I'm sure Mr. Laws has something better to say.
Thank you, Mr. Oland. Mr. Laws, I'm going to mute you and start your video here. All right, looks like you're good to go.
All right, thanks, Hannah. So Paul actually did a really good job answering the question or responding to the comments. So a couple things on the drainage side. Yes, that's something we're very much aware of in terms of the impacts existing today from Carmack Bosch There has been a recent flood control study within that area. We have shared the results of that study with Paul Olin and his team. So as this project moves forward, we will be looking at that very closely. In addition to that, again, Paul, you hit that traffic comment as well. You know, a lot of times in these types of situations where we know traffic has been reduced, in this case because of a pandemic, we rely more on historical data and then grow those numbers accordingly just to verify there's not going to be a negative impact. So we'll be looking at that very closely as well. So that's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Laws. Hopefully, I think I got a little quiet again. Peg, I'm going to unmute you one more time. Real quick, did you have any follow-up comments?
Yes, just one. I think that the civil engineers need to come and see the corner of our property as it has eroded from the last construction on that property. And the way that the water flows is really, of course, we haven't had that much rain, but when you see what it does to my property, I think it's going to definitely impact us unfavorably. So thank you. I appreciate your having this meeting.
No, and thank you very much for those additional comments. I do want to point out to the group, because we do have still a number of hands raised, we are going until 8 o'clock this evening. So I am going to jump back to Karen's iPad and ask to unmute you again, Karen's iPad, and hopefully we can hear you this time. All right, so we can't hear you if you're speaking. And this is Karen's iPad. All right, so unfortunately we still can't hear you. Please give Jessica Hind a call at 229-4711 if you need additional assistance. All right, so next is going to be Tim Terrace, followed by Liz's iPad. And Mr. Terrace, I'm going to ask to unmute you. All right, and Mr. Terrace, please make sure you're also not muted on your end.
How's that?
Oh, we can hear you. Would you like your video on?
No, thank you.
All right, go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay, concerning Mr. Olin and Laws, I live directly west of all of this, across the street. I have two driveways, one that goes to Buena Vista and one that goes to Concordia. And sometimes I have to pick which driveway to try and leave my property because of the traffic. I'm directly north of the boarding for the horses, but there is very difficult times for that. I only have a couple of questions. One is the total projected cost. How does the church expect to pay for it? And one of the words Mr. Olin used was rush hour. I'd like to know what that means. Those are my three questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Terrace. Mr. Olin, can you respond to those?
Sure. So in terms of the funding question, that's I'm not at liberty to answer that. That's the church's business. But in terms of rush hour, within traffic engineering circles, there's a peak time when there's a slug of traffic that comes through in the morning, and then one in the afternoon. And with a school nearby, the afternoon peak is actually kind of a double peak where you've got school letting out, and then after that there's normal rush hour with folks coming home from work. The traffic study that the traffic engineer is preparing will identify in this area where those peaks are. Off the top of my head, I don't exactly know where, what times those are, because every place is a little bit different, but the study will certainly quantify that and then work it into the model for how the proposed uses might affect the overall flow. in volumes.
Great, thank you, Mr. Oland. Mr. Terrace, I'm going to ask to unmute you again, just if real quickly, if you have a follow-up comment or question.
I was just gonna say, come on over and have a cup of coffee with me and sit in my driveway. It'll help you with your study. The point, at what point is the church going to have to reveal the cost and projected revenue sources to fund this project, and who would that be to?
I'm not aware of a code requirement for that information to be divulged.
Okay. So yeah, thank you, Mr. Terrace, for your questions and comments. We are going to move on to Liz's iPad, and then following that is Robin Cool. So Liz's iPad, I'm going to ask to unmute you. All right, looks like you were unmuted. Would you like your video on?
Sure, I ain't scared.
All right, just give me one moment. It should be coming on here. In a minute, just make sure it's also not turned off on your end. All right. All right, looks like we can see and hear you, so go ahead whenever you're ready.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is James, not Liz. It's just my wife's iPad. Sorry about that. Hey, I'm kind of interested, first of all, probably kind of a follow-up question to the last gentleman that spoke. Business or nonprofit, I'd be kind of an interesting, is the goal for you guys to provide some kind of revenue generating business, or are you guys considered a nonprofit? Also, overall parking capacity of the existing versus the new build. What's the total parking capacity going to be? And I think Olin is his name, mentioned something to the effect that, and I'm not sure if it's a private engineering company regarding the traffic flow. Was it the city engineer, or was that a private engineer that said there would be no problem with traffic flow there? And then the final question is, when you build phase one, you'll be building the open field with lights. And if you decide not to finish phase two, will that just stay an open field with lights? And if so, how tall are the lights going to be? That's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you, sir. I'll direct that to Mr. Oland. If you wanted to touch on the nonprofit question, parking capacity, and lighting for that field.
Sure. So in terms of the business versus nonprofit, the church is a nonprofit entity. This, as Mr. Collins indicated at the beginning, this is not a business venture. This is an outreach. They're not trying to make money. They're trying to spread the gospel. In terms of the parking calc, I don't have that number in front of me, but I will certainly get it from the civil engineers. They've got those plans underway. The town has a very kind of a unique parking requirement where it's not a minimum or a maximum like it is in some jurisdictions. It's an exact number. But for a case like this, where we have a bunch of different uses that are going to be sharing the same parking, there's a real opportunity for cutting down on the amount that we're actually building. Nobody wants to overbuild parking. And on Sunday mornings, for example, when the sanctuary and youth worship venues are going to be most heavily used, that wouldn't be the time when the other buildings are probably being heavily used. So there's no need to provide a peak parking demand for every use on site. So what we'll do is we'll look at that, all the different uses and when we expect them to overlap, and then propose our parking calculation to the town based on that. In terms of the question about the field lighting and how tall, that's a great question. And I will certainly find that out. That's not something that I had thought about. but can certainly get that information.
Thank you, Mr. Oland. Liz's iPad, sir, I'm going to unmute you just real quick one more time. If you just have a very quick follow-up comment or question.
Yeah, you claim that your activities will not correlate with, I'm assuming you're saying that the traffic flow will stay down based off your activities not flowing with the high school's activities. But how can you claim the fact that your activities will not correlate with, I mean, there's a swim center there, there's a park there, there's Little League, there's all sorts of sporting venues in that area that are regularly utilized. So I'm kind of perplexed on how you can claim your traffic flow will not impede with existing traffic flow. It's just a comment and a observation. Thank you.
Sure. So what I think the statement I made was that the peak traffic generation for this project won't correlate with typical rush hours. In terms of other activities that are happening at the park or CDO, there may be some overlap, but again, there's capacity in the road system to handle it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Oland. So next we have Robin Cool, followed by Christopher's iPad. All right, so Robin Cool, I'm going to ask to unmute you.
Hi,
All
Hannah.
right, so, hi, would you like your video on, ma'am?
Yes, please. Okay.
All right, looks like you are good to go whenever you're ready.
I'm Robin Cole. This is my iPad, and my husband, Brad Brum. Many of you have gotten to know in the last week and a couple days since we found out about this project. And we are the neighbors just north of the church. And a couple months ago, our neighbors who are north of us, who we've been friends with, we've lived here for 16 years, sorry. And the neighbors north of us, who we have known for all that time and have very good relationships with, they are members of the church. And we found out from them that the church purchased that property. And we said, great, we're neighbors on both sides and we're excited. And they talked about playing fields. And so last Saturday, or a week and a half ago, we looked at this video that we saw was posted and were stunned at what the playing fields became, and really disappointed that it felt very deceptive. And so Brad will go into all the details because he's a detail kind of guy. We invite any of you to come over to our home once the poles are erected to see what we're talking about in terms of the impact on our lives and in our community. So I'm going to hand it over to Brad and let him do his spiel.
Hi, Hannah. Hi, Paul. My name is Brad Brum. Paul kind of scoffed when I met with him before when I said that this project was the size of the Super Walmart on La Cholla. What I found out was that this indoor stadium that they want to build is 48 feet high. That's 5 stories high. And when I calculated how big that is, that's 5 million cubic feet of a building. That's bigger than the Super Walmart on La Cholla. And I was looking at the aerial view of that facility on La Cholla. It's got 40 ACs on the roof. And I can already hear the swamp coolers on top of CDO High School. The other thing about this project is that's just the one building. And my estimate on the other buildings is that's as big. So it's not that you're putting in one Super Walmart, you're actually putting in 2 Super Walmarts in terms of cubic footage, or not cubic footage, but yeah, cubic square feet, because they're so tall. You know, for this project, they tore down 2 houses and they want to put in 2 super Walmarts in a residential zone. So my comments are this project, this mega project, it's too big for the land that they have. And the other worry I have is that when the church gets so big that they have to move out to Marana or by the freeway, we're going to be left with this abomination. And I'm also worried that just the upkeep of a building like that it's going to put the church in financial straits. That's what I'm worried about. And we're going to be left with this. So this project is going to be 420 feet of my southern view of my property line. So I'm concerned that not only is that big building a problem, but the angled part too is just as big. And you know, I'd be happy with an open field, but I don't know if the southern neighbors are going to be happy with, you know, I don't know the numbers yet, but I estimate that it's between 4 and 5 million cubic feet of building space in a place that doesn't have enough parking already. Okay, thank you.
And just to be clear, we know that we moved into a neighborhood and we invited that. We actually were able to kind of steal the property from another buyer because they were hesitating because of the high school. And we know that there's traffic because of that. We have 4 children who have gone to the high school. Our youngest is there right now. And so it's not about not wanting to have development. It's not about not wanting to be community, to understand what the church is about. We appreciate that. We love that. And truly, if it were just the, you know, the buildings that seem consistent with youth activity, with conferences, with meetings, that's an impact on our neighborhood, but you know, we wouldn't mind that so much. It's just this this unbelievably huge building that seems to have very little to do with, I understand the mission of the church, but it just seems really excessive and so inconsistent with our neighborhood. I would repeat that. So thank you for your time. Anything else, Brad?
Oh, I got one more comment.
So, okay, make it real quick. If this is going to be a follow-up question, we still have another couple speakers. So.
Real quick, if you want to know what 50 feet tall is, on Buena Vista, there are the power lines. Those power poles are 30 feet tall. Add 20 feet to that, and that's the size or the height of the building that they want to put back there right next to my house.
All right, now thank you. Thank you for those comments. Just out of respect to the other speakers, Mr. Oland, if you're able to address those concerns about compatibility concerning noise and views specifically.
Sure. Well, we've had a conversation with Dr. Brum and Ms. Cool, and we will continue those conversations. I do want to dispel the notion about Super Walmart. I just looked it up here. The Super Walmart on La Cholla is 205,000 square feet. The large building that we're proposing is about 85. So it's I know that's still a big number, and I can see Brad raising his eyebrows at me, but it's not a Super Walmart. So, and then in terms of the concern about the church's ability to upkeep this facility, they've got a pretty pretty good campus already. They've got a good sense for what it takes to keep it up. They've got good, again, national consultants that are helping them program this all out, and they have a fiscal responsibility to their parishioners not to enter into arrangements that are going to put the church in financial distress. So those are all decisions they're going to make very carefully.
Thank you, Mr. Oland. And real briefly, if you have thought about this as part of your designs yet, as far as any noise from the electrical or mechanical equipment, do you have any information on how that will be mitigated for?
Certainly, all of that stuff will be screened. I don't know at this point. I can check with the architects about where it would be located. I think you wouldn't have any roof mounted equipment. I think what they're talking about are ground mounted equipment with walls and landscaping. So it wouldn't be the monstrosity like Mr. Brum described.
Thank you. And just out of respect for our speakers, I'm going to move over to Christopher's iPad. So I'm going to unmute you. Christopher's iPad. All right. Oh, okay. You are unmuted. So if you're, okay, looks like we can see you. If you're speaking, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Oh, now we go. There we go. Okay, whenever you're ready.
So thanks for having this meeting. It's pretty informative to kind of hear what's going on. I'm actually Ed's neighbor. I have the I'm fortunate to live across from the Oro Valley Yard. So the noise appreciation and some things, I think it's good that Oro OVCN gets to hear kind of people's questions and their concerns. I'd like to make a comment really, what they do wouldn't really affect me. Like I said, I have the Oro Valley Yard between myself and the church, but I kind of approach it from more of a pragmatic view. There's been a lot of comments about the need for sports and what the church does. And although traffic could be a concern, there's some other concerns. It would be nice if those could be resolved, because in the finite wisdom of our voters in the state of Arizona, we have approved the recreational marijuana use. We've built a ton of apartments up and down Oracle Road. We're going to bring things to the community that may have a more negative impact than a building. And although the concerns are real, it would be nice to have that outreach of a church, because it's quite a bit different than a school setting or a recreational park, where they're actually trying to help maybe the morality of the children and teach them things. So maybe by the time they get to the age where they could use recreational marijuana, they would choose not to. So I think it's the mission of the church, I think, is really good. I think it's impactful, very positive to the community. So I would just say that if the concerns of traffic and drainage and building heights can be, mitigated in some way or resolved, that we also as a community take into consideration some of the negative impacts that we haven't even seen in our community yet. I too love this neighborhood. I live here. My house was built in '75. I really do like it, but I also have to take some of those things into consideration. I don't really have any questions per se. I learned more tonight than I would have had questions for. So thanks again for having me, and I appreciate it.
Great. Thank you very much for those comments. So it looks like Karen's iPad is still on. And I did receive word that hopefully her audio issue was resolved. So we're going to try this one more time. So Karen's iPad, I am going to ask to unmute you. All right, so you're unmuted.
Okay, I think, can you hear me this time?
We can hear you. Would you like your video on?
I'll try it. Okay, we'll see.
All right, so just make sure it's also not on your end.
Well, I'm not sure if I've got the video, but at least you can hear me. I would like to comment that very clearly this is a rezoning issue that's been brought up again. This is zoned R1 144 agricultural, and this would be changing quite a large section of the property. In the immediate vicinity, there's 3 or 4 horse boarding facilities, and these facilities also use Calle Concordia. Horses can walk along Calle Concordia and what's already here. There are also bicycle paths on Calle Concordia. So we're not just talking about car traffic, we're talking about bicycles, pedestrians, and horses. Bicycles to the CDO high school, bicycles to the aquatic center, and pedestrians. So this is a multi-use street, and we're not looking for more cars on Calle Concordia. The electrical that I think Mr. Fagan brought up, we've actually had some brownouts because of summertime electrical, everyone using their air conditioner. So I would assume TEP will take care of that. Another question though, are they on city water or well water? What are they going to be using for water? And then a last speaker who brought up about, maybe it was 2 speakers ago, some financial issues. Are they planning on leasing this for Tucson soccer tournaments? So we'll be bringing in more traffic from around the city to use the facility, sort of not just an outreach, but rather sort of to make money in order to provide for this stadium to be built. So I have concerns about increasing traffic and usage with that. I tend to believe that this is not appropriate for this area, this residential area, residential agricultural area. And those are my comments.
Great, thank you very much for those comments. Mr. Olin, did you respond to traffic compatibility with the surrounding area, maybe bringing in more traffic for events, as well as electrical and water issues?
Sure. So in terms of compatibility, again, I've said it before, but we're early in the process and we're talking to our neighbors. I've identified several specifics during this meeting that we will circle back with and address. In terms of traffic, again, the traffic engineers have indicated that Calle Concordia does have capacity for additional vehicular traffic. That said, I know that the facilities for pedestrians are not as strong on Calle Concordia as they could be, just with the sidewalk. So we'll be looking at making appropriate connections to those and making sure that any access points, access configurations that we have to Calle Concordia are as safe as possible. And of course, all that'll be reviewed by town engineering as well. Water source will be Oro Valley Water, which does have a certified water supply by the state. This keeps getting called a stadium, but a stadium truly has a lot of seating, and this is not envisioned that way. This is a field that will be enclosed, and it will have places for people to stand around it, parents, teams, things like that. But there are no huge bleachers or anything else like that. So it's really it's not quite accurate to call it a stadium. And to that end, it really wouldn't be an appropriate place for a big tournament or anything like that. And then I'm not sure what to say about brownouts. That is a TEP question, but whenever new development comes in, they always seem to find ways to increase the strength of their infrastructure. So that's something that we'll certainly be looking into when we get down that far in the development design process.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Oland. So we are nearing the very end of our meeting. I do want to see if we can, just out of respect for everyone's time here, I do want to see if we can get RY unmuted. He has been waiting around a while. See if he has the issue fixed. You are unmuted, RY, and you'll be our last speaker here. If you're, oh,
are you there?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, celebration.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I had to go into settings on my iPad and turn the microphone on for Zoom manually.
Okay, glad you were able to figure it out. So whenever you're ready, go ahead.
3 tries. Well, you can put me on. I want to see my pretty face.
All right, just ask to start your video. Looks like thinking about, there we go. There you are.
There I am. Hey, some context. My first wife and I were married in the Church of Oro Valley. My wife and I went to the church services when they were in CDO library. I graduated from CDO. I played 4 years of Hell Week football at CDO. What that means for the soccer player, that means you wear 15 pounds of pads in addition to just your shorts and your shirt in the heat. And I survived it. So my comment really is, this is residential zoning. It should stay residential zoning. My mom has enjoyed those views for 40 years, and now you want to obliterate them, you want to destroy them, and I'm violently opposed to that. So my question is this a done deal? Is this a democratic process? Can we stop this, or are we just wasting our time?
No, thank you for that question. I mean, I can actually answer that. So this is just the very first step in a really intensive public outreach process. A rezoning does ultimately require approval by town council. So they can either approve, deny, or continue an application when it is considered. So it's ultimately up to town council to decide whether or not to approve the request. But again, throughout this whole process with the neighborhood meetings, with the Planning and Zoning Commission, public hearings, and the town council public hearings, we do fully expect this application and proposal to evolve. So the end product that will be presented to town council, should it keep moving forward, will be, could be, or probably will be very different, even based on what we've heard at this meeting as far as questions, concerns about the proposal. You can always email questions to ask at orovalleyaz.gov. And any questions and comments we receive, those will be forwarded to Planning and Zoning Commission and Town Council when they consider the application. Throughout this entire process, we'll be collecting those questions and comments, both to see how they're addressed in formal submittals and resubmittals, and also passed on to Planning and Zoning Commission and Town Council when the application is received and considered. So I'm just gonna unmute you one more time. All right, did
So
that answer your question?
Yeah, those questions, thank you, I appreciate it. So I have a follow-up question. If the church is allowed to get this rezoning done, does that mean that my mom can submit a rezoning request to change her property to high-density residential? So we could put a 5-story apartment complex in there?
So I can also answer that. So for specific zoning districts do have base sizes for zoning. I can't recall off the top of my head what a high density residential zoning district is sized for. But in short, the property likely does not meet that size. I hope that answered that question. I'm definitely happy to follow up with you if you email ask@orovalleyaz.gov. I do want to squeeze in Elizabeth, Rob. Oh, and I'm sorry, I do want to clarify for rezoning that any property owner does have the ability to request a rezoning. So I apologize if that wasn't made clear. So I do want to squeeze in one more speaker, Elizabeth Robb. Looks like you are our last one. So I do appreciate everyone hanging out here tonight. I know we're a little past 8 o'clock here. But Miss Elizabeth Robb, I'm going to unmute you. All right, so you are unmuted. Would you like your video on?
Sure.
All right, so we can see and hear you. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
All right. Hello. Heard from all my other neighbors, figured I might as well chime in too. I'm actually the northwest corner, just above the horse property, and with Tim's driveway coming on either side of my north and west. And the church has been a pretty good neighbor to us. I mean, we've been here since '98, never had any real issues with them, but this is just pushing the limits. Concerns with it really does not go with the agricultural and residential. Concerns with the traffic, holy cow. At this point, I can't even get out of my driveway with just the school traffic twice a day for 20 minutes. And that's just, I live with that, I know that. But if it gets worse, my driveway comes out at the intersection, and it's not going to be possible to get out, and there's no other way for me to get off my property. And if we end up with a stoplight or four-way stop sign, that isn't much of an improvement. So it's huge concern. I've noticed the same drainage issues that my neighbor to the south has since the new construction. And again, the view is amazing, and it's not going to be even close to the same. And that pretty much sums up what I have to say in a short period of time.
No, thank you very much for those comments. Mr. Olin, did you have anything that you'd like to add to those comments?
Not really. I mean, I've heard concerns, the two concerns about traffic and drainage. I hear that loud and clear, so we'll certainly be looking into that stuff.
Thank you. So just out of respect for everyone's time, looks like we've got through all our speakers. So again, really appreciate you all hanging out past 8 o'clock here tonight. Let me just, give me one moment here and I will get my slide back up. All right, so now that we're approaching the end of our meeting, I would like to sum the process up. So following a formal submittal and staff review for code conformance, a second fully interactive Zoom neighborhood meeting will be held. Following a second neighborhood meeting, 2 Planning and Zoning Commission public hearings will be held and will be additional opportunities to participate and provide your comments. And lastly, the proposal will be considered at a public hearing by Town Council, where you will also be able to provide additional comments. Again, the goal of this process has been and will continue to be to listen to everyone's questions and concerns. So lastly, please continue to forward all questions and comments to ask@orovalleyaz.gov and go to ovprojects.com to visit the project webpage, where we will continue to add new information as it becomes available. Please be on the lookout for information regarding a second neighborhood meeting. Again, if you did not receive a yellow postcard for this meeting and wish to be notified in the future, please email ask@orovalleyaz.gov and we'll be sure to put you on our notice list. So I want to thank you all again very much for your time tonight, especially during these challenging times and staying later in the meeting. So thank you again, and I hope you all have a great evening.